So let's take a look at policy real quickly. So these are kind of the top policies that Sun both thinks about, documents, and then executes to. It starts with data classification. This is kind of one of the most important pieces, right? And when we talk about data classification, it can be all the way from what's really sensitive to the agency or the company and has very limited access to a set number of people, all the way to, hey, this is just public digestible. We want everybody and anybody to get their hands on it. And then there's some gradient spectrum in between those 2 points. And until you've kind of classified your data, and the intelligence community does it, right? Secret, top secret, unclassified. But every agency should look at their data that way and classify it accordingly. Once you have that policy, a lot of things start to make sense as far as who has access, what you should do with it, how you should protect it. Least privileged. So this is, how do I give a user the least amount of privileges and access to data and applications to get their job done? And I don't want to give them any more than that. And so once you start to understand what least privileged is across your community of users and the roles that they play, things start to make better sense. You look at separation of duty. There's certain categories of people inside your organizations, whether it be the developers and their duties that they have, compile code, write code, install, your system administrators, your financial people, your executives, all of them have different roles, and you need to separate their duties and access to applications and the data that they need. Data encryption, that's kind of is a high-profile thing right now. Why? Because data gets lost, and the first question, was it encrypted? And people are wondering, oh no, can people read the data if it's been compromised? And you need to come up with a policy for how you're going to encrypt your data. Are you going to encrypt everything? Kind of expensive, really hard. Don't know if we need to do that. It's the website, right? Remember data classification, probably don't need to encrypt that. But, oh, this is really sensitive. And so are you going to encrypt your tape backups? So if you lose a tape with a couple terabytes of data on it, you know it's safe and you can report back accordingly. Are you going to encrypt laptops of your employees? So you need to have a policy on data encryption. Device shredding. What are you doing with the hundreds of old hard drives, laptops, media? It sounds like a very simple thing, but the policy on that we do within Sun. Your authentication. Is it two-factor authentication with password and some kind of physical token? Logging for auditing purposes. What are you going to log and what are you going to be able to report on? And how are you going to be able to turn that around in an auditor's time frame? Usually they're not happy if you tell them, hey, I'll get back to you in a couple months on that. They're usually wanting to know that you can get back to them in a 24-hour turnaround on certain issues within your infrastructure. And then user provisioning and patch management. So these are all things from a policy standpoint. It sounds boring, but this is like the fundamental foundation of your security stance, right? Once you have your policies in place and they're understood and agreed to across the organization, everything else starts to fall into place. And down the road, you can talk about products. You can figure out what you want to do with your people. The reason we have policies and processes is we do have responsibility somewhere inside our organization to report back that we have developed and maintained and delivered a secure computing environment. Call them auditors, inspector generals, whatever it is. They're going to come in and say, hey, how's it going? Is it secure? Can you prove it to me? Here's so this is Sarbanes-Oxley auditing report. So this is a little bit commercial oriented, but these are the kind of things that the auditors are finding. And they seem really obvious. You're like, man, I would think that these have been done. But these are the ones that continually pop up. There's no separation of duty. Everybody kind of gets to do everything. As to Don's question, we do a separation of duty and least privilege inside our engineering community. The operating system has access and can run anything, anywhere. Everybody is super user, or nobody, you don't know who is super user and can do things on the system. The employees come and go without you knowing. I was at a meeting yesterday, and I won't say the company, but they have 80,000 employees and 90,000 mail buyers. They have 10,000 more mail mailboxes and employees, and they don't know why, right? So obviously, people have left the company, mailboxes haven't gone away, privileges haven't been turned off, and so that's a real threat. So these are the things, and the auditor actually just wants you to say, show me the processes and prevention steps that you have taken. They usually don't come and say, show me your firewall product, right? They want to know that you have thought about your policy, put it into place through a process, and that you've documented and can demonstrate it accordingly. You want to define the roles of people inside your organization. And access management, and there's software that Sun sells and other companies in the industry sell for controlling and defining kind of access management and the roles that people play inside the organization. So what access management does is you're basically defining the groupings of people. So let's take software developers. Actually, let's take a university example. So in universities, you may have your faculty, you may have your alumni, the administration, and admissions, right? And so each of those are very well-defined groups of people. And in access management via various software tools and products and in your policies, you're going to define the applications and the data that those different groups should get to. So your alumni, they're going to get to maybe the alumni database and the email system for distribution, and your faculty is going to get to the system that has grades on it where they can enter grades, and your admissions is going to get to SAT scores and different things. And quite frankly, all four of those groups and their access to data and applications really shouldn't mix or commingle, right? They're very well defined. And back to your auditing and your processes, you want to be able to prove that those firewalls exist and that the protection of data and application between those two groups. In addition to that, you can define kind of what is presented to those users at the desktop level, right? So rather than just, every menu is available, every application, and you just can't log in, you should be able to customize the desktop presentation to your users. So if that faculty member were to log on to the network, what they're presented is a customized desktop to that role that they play within the university, or that admissions, so that, one, they're not tempted. Maybe they shouldn't even be aware that certain data or applications exist. It's just the temptation of digging in and figuring out what it is and why they don't have access to it. So you should challenge yourself in that IT space of, am I presenting a customized desktop that only defines what and where they should be and be spending their time? Kind of going hand in hand with access management is identity management. So we've defined the roles that the people are going to play inside the organization or do and fulfill. And then we're going to define the authentication of who they are. Are they who they say they are, right? And how are you going to know that, right? Remember back to your policies. So this is kind of where you write it. And then in your people, this is where you're going to make it a reality. And again, there is identity management software suites from Sun and other companies that will help you do this. I think in the past, agencies have tended to kind of patchwork quilt identity management. Back in the old days when I used to program, everything was really stovepiped, and you kept your database of users and the login and the password management all was within the application. And you ended up with these silos of applications that had passwords, and as you moved around, you had different passwords. And so identity management really has a way of pulling that together. Whether you still have silos, it can kind of read those silos and bring it into a centralized database, and you begin to both authenticate and match up the people with their roles in identity management. So that software developer, the role's been defined, you have identified them, you say, oh, great, welcome to the network, software developer. The access that you have through that authentication is the developer suite. We're going to present the desktop to you, and you have access to these applications and this data.